Ever wonder how we went from like the cat's pajamas to lit? It's wild, right?
Totally.
Today's deep dive is all about how American English has, well, transformed over the past century.
Yeah. 100 years of slang, that's a lot to unpack.
It really is. We've got some fascinating research to dive into, so get ready for some serious aha moments.
What I think is really cool is how we can actually trace these changes, like back to specific events and trends,
Oh, absolutely.
like language is this detective's notebook full of clues about where we've been and who we are.
Okay, so picture this. It's the 1920s, right? And this newfangled thing called radio, it's all the rage, everyone's tuning in.
Right.
But here's the thing. Back then, you couldn't just have, folks showing up with their local twang. Imagine tuning in and hearing a different accent every 5 minutes.
Oh, total chaos.
Right.
And that's actually where the Mid-Atlantic accent comes in.
Oh, yeah.
This, like, carefully crafted blend of northern and southern pronunciations.
It's very, very proper.
Yes. Polished. A bit posh, even. It was considered the ideal voice for national broadcasting, and honestly, it had a huge impact on how people even spoke in their everyday lives.
So instead of like sounding like you were from Boston or Charleston or, wherever, you wanted to sound like you belonged on the radio. Talk about the power of media, right?
It's incredible. And it wasn't just about, like, losing your regional accent. Think about phrases like the cat's pajamas becoming all the rage.
Oh, classic.
That little gem spread like wildfire thanks to Hollywood.
They loved that one.
Movies gave people across this huge country this shared experience, and with it, they absorbed new slang without even realizing it.
It's like you weren't just watching a movie, you were downloading a new language pack.
Exactly.
But this influence, it didn't stop with radio. As we move into the golden age of television, things get even more interesting.
Oh, absolutely. By the 1950s, television had replaced radio as America's, like, favorite pastime. Shows like I Love Lucy, they weren't just entertainment.
They were trendsetters.
Yes. Linguistic trendsetters.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This coincided with the rise of the suburbs.
Right. Families were packing up, moving out of the cities, creating these melting pots where kids from all different backgrounds were suddenly attending the same schools, watching the same shows.
And as a result, they started speaking more alike.
Makes sense.
Regional differences began to fade, especially among those younger generations. Terms that were once specific to certain areas, like cool or groovy,
Groovy.
spread like wildfire thanks
Yeah.
to their exposure through television and just youth culture in general.
You know what's wild? You probably use words and phrases today that originated in a completely different part of the country, all thanks to this, like, homogenizing effect of television.
Isn't that something? But while all this standardization was happening, other forces were pushing language in new and exciting directions.
Oh, for sure.
The 1960s in particular were a turning point, I'd say.
And we are back. Before the break, we were talking about how television, like, standardized American English. But the 1960s, they really threw a wrench in the works, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The 1960s were this period of just profound social and cultural upheaval. And language, I think, really became this battleground for change in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
One of the most significant shifts, I think, was a rise in visibility and influence of African-American vernacular English.
AAVE.
Yes, exactly, AAVE. And it's interesting because it wasn't just that more people were hearing AAVE during this time, right?
Yeah.
It was also gaining recognition as its own distinct dialect with its own, like, unique grammar and structure. That's huge. That's right. And I think it goes beyond simple recognition, right? Because AAVE starts to influence the mainstream, particularly through music. You think about jazz and later hip hop, they were deeply rooted in AAVE, and those sounds, they infiltrated everything.
And it's true. And it's like it went from the margins to the mainstream. And I think about words like bad, meaning good, or even cool itself, right?
Yeah.
These have roots in AAVE.
Yeah.
And they became part of how everyone spoke, not just one community. And that's a powerful testament, I think, to how language also reflects who has cultural influence.
You're spot on. And, it wasn't just about race and language either,
Yeah.
right? The women's liberation movement also left its mark on American English.
Absolutely.
Remember how we were talking about media sort of standardizing things?
Mhm.
Feminists challenged that too.
For sure.
They questioned why he was the default pronoun,
Yeah.
why chairman was the standard.
Yeah. And this is when we see terms like chairperson or they as a singular pronoun starting to gain traction. And it wasn't just about being like politically correct, right? It was about recognizing how language itself can reinforce biases, that
Yeah.
we might not even be aware of.
Exactly. Using more inclusive language was a way to challenge that status quo and promote equality.
Hmm.
And so I think, these movements, they really show us that language isn't this static thing, right?
Mhm.
It evolves alongside our values, and those shifts can be incredibly
Absolutely.
powerful.
It makes you wonder, like, would those phrases have gained mainstream acceptance without those movements kind of pushing for broader social change? I mean, it's hard to imagine language evolving in a vacuum separate from everything else that's happening.
Totally.
Yeah.
Now hold on to your hats because we're about to fast forward to another era of massive linguistic change, the digital age.
Oh, yeah.
Right, remember when email was this new fancy thing and we were all writing these super formal messages, terrified of typos?
Oh man, it was like we were sending telegrams, not casual messages.
Exactly. But then the internet truly exploded.
Mm.
Chat rooms, instant messaging, and suddenly abbreviations were everywhere.
LOL, BRB, OMG. It was like we had a whole new vocabulary to
Oh,
learn.
absolutely.
Right.
And punctuation. Forget about it.
Out the window.
Yeah, yeah. But seriously, the informal nature of digital communication, it really changed how we write, even if we don't realize it.
It's true. It's like we basically invented this new dialect for the internet where brevity was king and emojis became the new punctuation marks.
Speaking of emojis,
Oh yeah.
social media took everything to a whole new level. Platforms like Twitter, with its character limit, forced us to be even more concise. Hashtags were born.
I bet most people don't even think of hashtags as slang,
Right.
but they really are.
They are.
It's like they're this form of shorthand, a way to convey an idea or join a conversation with just a few keystrokes, and they've just become this integral part of how we communicate online.
Absolutely. And then there's, of course, the slang that emerged specifically from these platforms, right?
Mhm.
Lit, ghosting, adulting terms that would made zero sense a generation ago.
Right?
But now they're part of our everyday lexicon.
It's amazing how quickly new words can just become ubiquitous, especially in the age of like viral trends and memes.
Oh, for sure.
Like remember when okay boomer became a thing?
Oh, absolutely. That phrase, it
Yeah.
perfectly captures that generational divide that we see play out online all the time.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a simple phrase can become this loaded symbol of intergenerational tension.
Memes in general, though, have had a huge influence on how we communicate. It's like they've turned phrases and images into these instantly recognizable symbols of shared experiences or emotions. Like they're like inside jokes, but on a global scale.
Exactly. And speaking of global,
Ooh.
let's talk about how globalization has shaped American English. That's where things get really fascinating. But first,
Oh
a
no.
quick break. We'll be right back to finish our deep dive into a century of slang.
And we are back for the final leg of our deep dive into a century of American slang.
The home stretch.
Right.
Right.
Before the break, we were on the cusp of globalization, which is like it's like the ultimate language mixer, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's not just about American English sort of becoming more widespread. It's about us becoming more open to incorporating words and phrases from all over the world.
Right. Like I bet you use fiesta or mañana without even thinking about it, even if you don't speak Spanish.
Oh, totally.
They've just become so integrated. It's like they're like honorary members of the English language.
Exactly. It's like our vocabulary has become this giant linguistic potluck
Hmm.
with words from all these different cultures adding their own flavor.
I love that.
And I think food's actually a really great example of this, right? Think about it. Sushi, latte, croissant,
Ooh, croissant.
right? All of these words, they reflect our changing, culinary tastes
Yeah.
and the increasing diversity of American culture.
It's like our language is a mirror.
Yeah.
Reflecting how interconnected the world has become.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think about this interconnectedness also in terms of how we think about inclusivity in language itself. Like the use of gender neutral pronouns, right? Like
Yeah.
they them has become much, much more common.
That's such an important point. It really reflects, I think, a growing awareness and acceptance of gender diversity.
Yeah.
And using inclusive language is it's crucial for creating a more equitable and respectful society.
It's like language can be a tool for shaping a better world, not just reflecting the one we're in.
Totally.
But speaking of shaping the future, where does technology fit into all of this, right? I mean, we've got AI writing our emails, we've got voice assistants in our homes. Are we all going to start talking like robots?
Right.
I mean, is that where we're headed?
Oh, it's a question worth pondering. I mean, while I don't think we'll be speaking in monotone bikes anytime soon,
Okay, good.
the way we interact with technology definitely influences our language. Think about how we've adapted to speaking to like Siri or Alexa, right? It's those short, concise phrases that often work
Oh,
best.
totally. I catch myself doing that all the time. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Add coffee to my shopping list. It's like my inner monologue is starting to sound like a tech manual.
It's true. And what about emojis, right? Are those just silly pictures, or are they actually changing the way we communicate on a deeper level?
Oh my gosh, I was just thinking about this the other day. Like, I use emojis constantly, but I never really thought about them as like changing language itself.
Right. Well, consider this. Emojis allow us to convey emotion and nuance in digital communication, often in ways that words simply can't.
It's true.
A well-placed emoji can, like, add humor, it can soften a blow, or even just express empathy in a way that plain text sometimes struggles to do.
Wow, when you put it like that, emojis are kind of profound. It's like they're bridging this gap between our digital interactions and our very human need for like emotional connection.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And, as technology continues to evolve at this just incredible pace, it'll be fascinating to see what new linguistic twists and turns kind of emerge in the decades to come. But one thing's for sure, the journey of American English is far, far from over.
And that's our deep dive for today. We journeyed from the smooth sounds of radio announcers to the emoji-filled texts of today. We explored how social change, technology, globalization, they've all left their mark on how we speak.
It's incredible to think about how much language really reflects who we are, both as individuals and as a society.
It really is.
The words we use tell a story,
Yeah.
and that story, it's still being written.
It is. It is. So next time you throw around some slang, take a second to think about its journey. Where did it come from? What does it say about us? And where might it go next? Keep those linguistic gears turning, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive.
Sounds good.